Statements to Congress back in 2020 and obstruction of justice. He pleaded not guilty. James, who also pleaded not guilty, was charged with bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. The case was being prosecuted by Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, who has never tried a criminal case. A Virginia federal judge found Halligan was illegally appointed to the role. Let's start with Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane. Scott, the judge's ruling, illegally appointed to the role. What does that mean?
Yeah, these two very high-profile criminal defendants made a series of arguments to get their cases dismissed. They both think they're politically motivated cases, vindictive prosecutions, that there was some form of problem with the grand jury as well. That's not what this is. This ruling is that the prosecutor on the case, Lindsay Halligan, who 2 months ago was a Trump White House aide, was not lawfully in the position of U.S. attorney, and therefore the cases must collapse. And they're dead for now, John. They're both dismissed without prejudice, which means they can be refiled, but it's going to be complicated for James Comey. His case is beyond the statute of limitations of 5 years. What the judge is saying here is that Lindsay Halligan is not in the position lawfully because there's a 4-month window in which you could have an acting U.S. attorney serving as top prosecutor. That window closed September 22nd. Therefore, Halligan is not to be the U.S. attorney unless judges choose her to be. What's more, John, in this unique scenario, Lindsay Halligan is the only prosecutor whose name is on the James Comey case and on the Letitia James case. She's the only one who would sign her name to it, the only one who presented to the grand jury. If she's not there lawfully, there's no second chair. There's no backup. Therefore, the cases are dismissed without prejudice as of today.
And, Scott, when a judge dismisses a case without prejudice, is that it? Any more we could glean from the judge in terms of any insight into what led to this decision?
Yeah, the judge emphasized that point I just mentioned, John, that because Lindsay Halligan's the only prosecutor on the case, there's no other place to go here other than dismissal. Yes, the Department of Justice can try to bring this case back against Letitia James, perhaps with a different set of prosecutors. With James Comey, it's going to be complicated. They're past the statute of limitations. This may be fatal to his case. And these two defendants, John, never had a chance to argue the merits of the case or fight their case on the facts alleged. They're just making a process issue here, but it seems to be a successful one.
And briefly remind us, Scott, of why the process led to a Lindsay Halligan appointment rather than the standard way of approaching these kinds of things.
Yeah, there was a Trump appointee in that job in September. He did not move forward with these controversial cases against Comey and James. He was ousted. Lindsay Halligan was installed. Her first orders of business on the criminal docket were these two cases, among others.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much. We now go to senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang. Weijia, we know that President Trump had a keen interest in these two cases. Has there been any reaction at the White House yet to this announcement?
John, as of right now, we have not heard from the White House or directly from President Trump, who, you're right, certainly expressed how he felt about these two cases in the days leading up to the indictments of both Comey and James. In fact, he posted on Truth Social on September 20th, just 5 days before Comey was indicted. And it seemed to be a direct message to Pam, meaning Pam Bondi, who is, of course, the Attorney General of the United States, in which Trump said he had reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action, nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia, question mark, question mark, question mark. They're all guilty as hell. And of course, he goes on to explain why he believes they are guilty, all of these people being his people that he considers to be political foes. And in the past, John, he has called for their prosecution, too. The reason why this particular post is notable is not only because the timing, but because there were questions later about whether the president meant to make them public or whether they were supposed to be a direct message to the Attorney General, which later he denied. So at this hour, we have not heard yet about Trump's reaction. But, John, you can imagine that that it will be one of disappointment and frustration since he has spent so much time claiming that the only reason that he himself was investigated by these two law enforcement officials was because of a witch hunt. That's according to Trump. John?
All right. Thank you so much, Weijia Zhang at the White House. Criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi is with us on the phone. Caroline, your reaction to this determination by the judge?
Yeah. Hi, John. I wanted to pick up something that Scott mentioned. This is not a complete victory for Comey, to be sure, because it was dismissed without prejudice. They were looking for a dismissal with prejudice. However, this is seriously going to set this prosecution. It's going to really derail the prosecution, and the person bringing this prosecution next, if they do, will not be likely Lindsay Halligan. The sixth finding in Judge Curry's order is that the power to appoint the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia under the statute lies with the district court. Remember, this judge is sitting by designation from South Carolina because the district in which the case is pending, all of those judges recused themselves essentially because that was the overarching issue in this appointment, whether that 120 days could effectively just be re-upped by the president and Pam Bondi indefinitely for, essentially skirting the appointments clause. And so while it's not, a complete and total victory, I think this case is not going to go to trial anytime soon, not to mention the myriad of other substantive issues that are in this case that are pending before a different judge in this district regarding, the selective and vindictive prosecutions, issues with the warrants, a ton of ways this cookie could crumble.
Right. Caroline Polisi, thank you. I want to go back now to Scott MacFarlane. Scott, among any new information you may also have, remind us put in context the idea of a president telling an attorney general who they should and should not charge.
A lot of people were eager to hear the arguments and the judge's opinion on this issue of vindictive prosecution. Last week, James Comey was in court, remarkable thing, arguing that this case was a political selective prosecution. That argument really isn't relevant anymore now that the case is dismissed. Not relevant to this case, but John, there are any number of political critics of the president who fear they face the same prospect of a criminal prosecution because of their criticism. They might have wanted to have seen what a judge said about this issue of selective vindictive prosecution if they, too, get charged in the coming weeks and the coming months. As Weijia mentioned, John, there's another name on that September 20th social media post from President Trump. California Senator Adam Schiff, who CBS News has learned has hired a private attorney with the prospect he gets charged down the road as well. All of these defendants, all these people have denied any wrongdoing.
Scott MacFarlane, a major bend in the road here for the Trump presidency and Justice Department as we learn the new rules under which both are operating. Once again, the federal indictments against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James have just been dismissed. A judge ruled prosecutor Lindsay Halligan was improperly appointed. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson.
All right, if you are just joining us, we have breaking news on the indictment against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. A U.S. district judge ruled the appointment of attorney Lindsay Halligan is unlawful. That judge went on to dismiss the indictment against Comey and James without prejudice. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now for much more. Jessica, thank you for your time. Can you walk us through what stood out to you in that ruling from the judge?
So this ruling is not about the merits of the case at all. I think people should know this. We've been talking a lot about these cases in terms of do they amount to selective prosecution or vindictive prosecution. This is all about the prosecutor. This is all about the process that took place to get Lindsay Halligan into the position as interim director of this U.S. Attorney's Office and whether or not she was properly appointed. Essentially, what the judge is saying here is because she didn't properly have her job, she couldn't bring these cases. Let's also remember that she played a key role in bringing these cases, unlike other cases where maybe there's a lot of career attorneys who join in bringing the cases, because in the office, there was, I want to say, near consensus that the cases should not be brought. And so Lindsay Halligan only had her job because her predecessor, Eric Siebert, who was appointed by Donald Trump, said, I don't want to bring these cases. That's what the reporting indicates. In this case, Lindsay Halligan there was an attempt to make her the interim head of this Eastern District of Virginia of the U.S. Attorney's Office. What we know today is that it looks like that attempt was unsuccessful.
And so the judge dismissed the cases without prejudice. Can you explain to us what that means? Can the charges be brought up again?
Without prejudice means exactly that these charges could be brought up again. One thing I want to point out that people at home who've been following these cases likely know is that this means different things for the James Comey case versus the Letitia James case. When it comes to the James Comey case, that case was facing the statute of limitations, meaning there were only 5 days to bring that case when it was brought, only 5 days left. The Letitia James case doesn't have the same timing issue. So even though the case can be brought again with respect to both, if another judge or this judge finds that the statute of limitations has run on the James Comey case, meaning it would be too late to refile, that case is dead.
And what about the Letitia James case? What does this mean for her?
So for her, it means, I think, that Lindsay Halligan is not going to be the lead prosecutor on her case, but she is in a different position, again, because there's a longer period of time left to bring her case. So what this means is that the case could be refiled if there is somebody who is properly appointed to the position. We can get into the details of the judge's determination, but again, I think for James Comey, it could mean the end of the case, depending on the timing. For Letitia James, likely not. It likely means the end of the prosecution by this prosecutor.
Yeah, and Jessica, as you said earlier, this ruling was not about, selective or vindictive prosecution. It was basically about the woman who was supposed to lead the case in the first place. So we're not really going to get to hear that argument made in court. But was there ever any standing to that argument in the first place?
To the selective and vindictive prosecution arguments, I think there absolutely were, and those are happening on a parallel track. When it comes to this question, just to make it clear, why isn't Lindsay Halligan properly appointed? Why did the judge find this? Because federal law says that you can appoint somebody to be the interim head of a U.S. attorney's office for 120 days. When that 120 days expires, if that person hasn't been nominated and confirmed, then the jurisdiction goes to federal judges to decide basically who do we want in that position. When it came to Lindsay Halligan's predecessor, Eric Siebert actually served that full 120-day terms. Then judges appointed him to serve out the rest of that term. And what the judge concluded here today is you can't then install somebody else, Lindsay Halligan, to serve another 120-day term. Basically, you get your first 120 days. You don't keep getting 120 days after that.
All right, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it. And now I want to bring in CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen for much more on this. Jake, what are you hearing from the Justice Department so far?
Well, we are awaiting formal comment or statements from Attorney General Pam Bondi or Department of Justice spokespeople about whether or not they intend to appeal this. It's very likely that they could. However, the ramifications for this decision today from a judge who was appointed, brought in from South Carolina to oversee this case, as Jessica just said, because of the conflicts of all the judges in the Eastern District of Virginia, is far-reaching. It will affect what's going on in New Jersey, where former Trump defense attorney, a different one, Alina Habba, was appointed to U.S. attorney there, and she was ruled by another judge that she was holding her job improperly. Same for a U.S. attorney out in Nevada, another Trump ally, and a third also in Los Angeles who is a federal prosecutor there. This has been a constant problem for the Trump administration, and it really hit a different set of facts when President Trump directed the Justice Department to investigate and prosecute James Comey and Letitia James and Adam Schiff Schiff, all quickly, as President Trump said, but doing so in this case really imperils not just the set of facts that we have to deal with here and whether or not there even is an ability for the Justice Department to re-indict Comey, given there was about 1 day left before that statute of limitations was set to expire after he was indicted. The Justice Department said in court when this argument was had that they believe they still have time to potentially make that argument and to re-indict him. However, whether this court-appointed now federal prosecutor to lead this U.S. Attorney's Office would actually sign on to that is a completely different set of facts, as you know.
Yeah. And Jake, we just got a statement from New York Attorney General Letitia James. She says, "I am heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from the country. I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue fighting for New Yorkers every day." So, Jake, I want to talk about this case. Can you remind us about how it came to be in the first place, and also the concerns surrounding the Justice Department?
Yes, and there's a number. Specifically on this Letitia James case, it was all about a mortgage that she took out for a home in Norfolk, Virginia, which is why for someone from New York and who's the Attorney General there, this case was brought in the Eastern District of Virginia, which includes Norfolk, Virginia, where this house was bought. The Justice Department in its indictment alleged that Letitia James used favorable mortgage credits and got favorable mortgage terms because she said she was going to use that house as a primary residence. In fact, they said that she got about $18,000 additional favorable loan towards her that she was able to get because she said she was going to live there, when in reality, the Justice Department said she really rented that home out to a family member of hers. This is not traditionally something that's necessarily gone after. We've actually seen some internal memos as part of Letitia James's refutation of this indictment saying that actually there were top U.S. mortgage officials at U.S. For federal credit lenders who said that there really was no case here despite it being brought. Now, while James Comey's case was ahead by about 2 weeks, we did get those arguments on a selective and vindictive prosecution. Letitia James's case has not really reached that point yet. However, she still has these number of threads to continue to unspool and pull on if the Justice Department re-indicts her. And as we know, there have been a number of challenges to the James Comey case. There are about 3. This was certainly the first domino and the most major domino to fall. However, there's a number of problems that judges have found with the evidence that was used, the warrants that were collected, and then used data that this judge found potentially was 5 or 6 years old that the FBI and Justice Department still had in their possession that may have been used improperly in indicting former FBI Director James Comey. All of that has yet to be sorted out yet. So there are just so many different threads here, Mugo, that if the Justice Department does choose to kind of refight these battles again, we already know a completely different set of facts that certainly leans more towards FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James potentially having more ammo at their side to shoot down this indictment or re-indictments potentially again on different grounds.
And Jake, we've spoken in the past about the Justice Department and other people you would consider maybe opponents of the president that the Justice Department seems ready to go after. In your opinion, and I know you cannot read their mind, obviously, but what does this say about the possibility of going after other people, like, say, Adam Schiff, for example?
Well, it's certainly we certainly know, Mugo, that these indictments and the way that this was brought, judges have said out loud in these cases that it appears that the Justice Department has moved to indict first and investigate second. That appears clear in the Attorney General Letitia James case. That certainly has been said out loud by 2 judges now, 3 judges, if you were to parse some words a little bit more in this James Comey case, all who have said there are problems with how the Justice Department rushed to do this under U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, who again was a former White House aide, former personal defense attorney from President Trump back when he was facing all those legal issues, who got put into this job to basically rush these indictments forward and to do what President Trump had asked for. That Truth Social post that you have played a couple of times, maybe we can put it up on the screen one more time, has been at the center of all these disputes, because to say out loud that you are directing your Justice Department as the president to indict your potential political foes and adversaries, that is key. To do that and to say that you are going to do that, Attorney General Bondi has said she's going to do that not just on these specific cases, but also the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. We know that federal investigators are actually questioning the potential case and the people who are looking into Senator Adam Schiff from California. There are so many problems with how this has kind of been conducted out in the Twitter sphere, out being directed on Truth Social and accepted out loud by the Justice Department in ways that we've never seen before in the United States Justice Department and justice system. system. Judges have criticized it. This is, again, certainly, Mugo, the first domino to fall, but we know Eric Swalwell is another person who's had his sights been put on him. Lisa Cook, that federal governor, that Federal Reserve governor, she's also been criticized for her mortgage handling and potential issues with that. So all of these cases that are kind of all bundled together in catching people for things that usually have not been prosecuted at this level, at a criminal level, have all come back to bite the Trump administration and the Justice Department. This is the most searing example, but we'll certainly see how this unfolds because, again, like we have to remind our audience, this case has not hit trial. We have not gotten close to trial. And there have been so many different tranches of buckets of memos and new information that we found out through small court filings that have gone on in court hearings that we just, for the Justice Department to bring these cases again would certainly come with a completely different set of facts, and there'd be a much stronger defense for all of these potential adversaries of President Trump who have been either indicted or are under investigation.
And obviously, we're still waiting to hear from the Justice Department to hear what they have to say about what this judge ruled on. So as soon as we have that, obviously, we'll let our viewers know about it. Jake Rosen, thank you so much for joining us. Now let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, thank you for your time today. Your takeaway from this ruling, thoughts?
Mugo, one thing that stood out to me in this ruling is that Trump's own legal issues came up in this opinion. Back when he was being prosecuted in Florida in the classified documents case, he ultimately got that dismissed by Judge Eileen Cannon by determining that special counsel Jack Smith had been unlawfully appointed under the Appointments Clause. Now, Judge Curry has determined that Lindsay Halligan has been unlawfully appointed in violation of the Appointments Clause. She violated Trump's own case in this decision, saying that the only remedy here is invalidation, meaning throwing out these cases against James Comey and Letitia James. So we're seeing Trump's own legal problems and the way that they were resolved coming up now under actions related to his own administration. She said that was the only way to resolve this constitutional issue, was to throw out these cases, Mugo.
And Katrina, I know obviously you're an attorney as well, and you think of the case against Letitia James or the case against James Comey. Are these cases that would have led to a long time in jail or in prison in the first place?
With Letitia James, no, she would not be facing much prison time. James Comey, potentially a little bit more. But I think the real issue here is these cases always seem to have a shaky foundation. And what the problem is, the reason that these are getting thrown out completely is because Lindsay Halligan was the only one to sign on to them. There have been other instances, Mugo, where it was determined that the U.S. attorneys that were put in as interim or acting have been deemed unlawfully appointed in other states, but their indictments have sometimes been allowed to stand because career prosecutors in those offices had taken the helm of those cases, had been the one to bring them into the grand jury room, had been looking into them for a long time. Here we have a very unusual set of circumstances. Lindsay Halligan was put into office within just a couple of days. She was in a grand jury room getting an indictment of James Comey. There are a lot of questions about what happened in that grand jury room. The judge mentions them in this opinion as well, even though it's not ultimately the reason that they were dismissed, according to her here, because she found that Lindsay Halligan's appointment was invalid because she was the only one to secure and sign these grand jury indictments. These cases are being dismissed. So we're seeing a very different set of circumstances here.
Yeah, and Katrina, we've been talking about how these cases came to be in the first place. The president basically posting on social media, talking to Pam Bondi and saying that this is something he wants to see happen. Now, there was always that question of selective or vindictive prosecution, which we obviously are not going to get to hear in court because the case has been dismissed. But would that have been a valid argument for James Comey to make, or even Letitia James to make?
Well, we did see arguments for James Comey related to his claim of vindictive prosecution. Now, Mugo, this is something that defendants rarely succeed on, but with these cases, they could possibly have fit into that rare instance because we have these very public social media posts by President Trump where he is saying that he wants these people prosecuted. So there was real evidence there that could potentially rise to this level of vindictive prosecution. Now, that was another basis on which he was trying to get the case dismissed. But at that hearing, too, a lot came out about what happened in the grand jury room, how this indictment was gotten in the first place, and potential prosecutorial missteps that the judge pointed to there. So there have just been so many issues related to these cases. Now we see that Lindsay Halligan has been deemed unlawfully appointed. We absolutely expect the Department of Justice to appeal this. So we could possibly still see further information about his vindictive prosecution claims, the same for Letitia James.
And I want to go back to the case against James Comey because, again, we know that the judge dismissed this without prejudice, which means charges could be brought back again. Is it possible with that James Comey case, considering the fact that they had a deadline in the first place to basically file charges against him?
I mean, that is a very good question. It really did seem as though they were bumping up on the statute of limitations there. I believe Jake Rosen was saying there was only about a day left. I'm sure that the Justice Department is still going to see what they can do here, if they can convince a judge that they still had a small window to bring this case back. I think it is very likely that when it comes to James Comey, that case is dead, though, because they were so close to the statute of limitations there. Now with Letitia James, that could be a different story.
All right. Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
And now I want to bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang. Weijia, thanks for your time today. Are we getting any reaction from the White House so far on this ruling from the judge?
Mugos, so far, we have not heard from the White House or from President Trump himself, although it's notable that he has been active on social media since this news broke. He posted about 20 minutes ago about Republican Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, talking about how Trump views him as somebody who is not a Republican in his eyes, and also attacking Senator Paul. But on your screen right now is the post from September 20th relevant to this case that I know that you have been talking about for quite some time, because it really is at the centerpiece of why this case was dismissed. And you can see here that in this post, the president appears to be sending a direct message to Pam, meaning Pam Bondi, who is, of course, the Attorney General of the United States. And he expresses deep frustration that nothing is being done. He goes on to say, what about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia, ? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. He wanted them to be prosecuted. He wanted them to face charges. And just days after he posted this, they were indicted. And so that is a big reason why the judge is making this ruling now, why this case has been tossed out. And while the president hasn't commented on that news, it's notable that he had full backing against this prosecutor in Virginia, who he appointed, Lindsay Halligan. In fact, on the same day that he posted that, he also said about Lindsay Halligan that she is tough, smart, and a loyal attorney who has worked with me for a long time. So he put his faith in this lawyer, even though she did not have experience prosecuting cases like this, and especially ones that are so complicated, Mugo, when it comes to a grand jury and presenting a full indictment to them. What's also notable, I think, is Comey's reaction when all of this was unfolding. He was defiant, and he said, bring it on. He said he believed in the federal justice system and that he was innocent. I don't believe we've heard from him yet either, Mugo, but we certainly are waiting to hear from all the big players who are really impacted by this ruling today, especially President Trump, who, again, so far has not said anything, but has certainly expressed leading up to all of this how he feels, which is that they should be prosecuted, because he has long said, Mugo, that both Comey and Letitia James were going after him for political reasons. And so that is why he has justified the fact that they, too, should be prosecuted.
All right. Weijia Zhang at the White House for us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Again, if you just joined us, breaking news on the indictment against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. A U.S. district judge ruled the appointment of attorney Lindsay Halligan is unlawful. That judge then went on to dismiss the indictment against Comey and James without prejudice. We'll have much more on this breaking news when we come back right here on CBS News 24/7.
Go to the ends of the earth.
We'll hit the heights.
A great adventure together.
And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
So cool.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Something that's undeniable.
With mindfulness.
Innovative.
Magical.
It's like being a child.
And truly original reporting.
God, you do your research. I tell a good story.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Money Watch is your no-nonsense guide to taking control of your finances, where I offer practical, real-world advice with no jargon and no judgment. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Listen to Money Watch wherever you get your podcasts.
Politics isn't a game. When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? Politics is about policy. So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like health care? I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now? To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
No matter how you start your day, one thing is very clear.
CBS Mornings is the best way to start your day.
You better work! Clearly.
Don't you bow. And
She
for
said
the nicest people in our green room, guess who's here?
Jeff! Good morning!
Thanks for having me. Y'all are family at this point. We'll see you
On CBS Mornings.
Weekdays at 7.
A detective hunts for answers. When a woman goes missing, for tracker Dakota Black, it's personal.
What was it about this woman that fueled you this way?
Just who she was. We started tracking the area. I was not going to stop until this case was solved.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
These farmers are on the front lines of the trade war.
What do you think about when you go to bed at night?
What's going to be left in a year? 2 years.
An eye-opening report on 60 Minutes.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the Takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity and formality and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on the Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
The CBS Evening News.
We are a resilient community that came back stronger.
The State of America.
We don't want the aid, we want the trade.
From every state in America.
We as Americans need to come together.
Love you, brother.
Weeknights on the CBS Evening News.
All right, we want to get back to breaking news this hour on the indictment against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. A U.S. district judge ruled the appointment of attorney Lindsay Halligan is unlawful, and the judge went on to dismiss the indictment against Comey and James without prejudice. Now, we got a statement from New York Attorney General Letitia James. She says, "I am heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support I have received from around the country. I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue fighting for New Yorkers every single day." CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now for much more on this. Okay, Scott, so can you walk us through the importance of this ruling and what it means for both Comey and James?
These were two landmark criminal cases, uniquely high-profile criminal defendants. They both now have their cases dismissed. And in the case of James Comey, it could be a fatal dismissal to this case. What the judge has done here is dismissed each case without prejudice. When they say without prejudice, that means you can, if you want to, try to refile it, prosecutors, through a different way. But James Comey's different. He's beyond the 5-year statute of limitations for his alleged crime, a crime he denies, making a false statement during this appearance in Congress in 2020. But that notwithstanding, James Comey's opinion, the opinion from the judge in the James Comey case, makes clear she's dubious the statute of limitations can be overcome, that there's a way for the prosecutors to bring that case back. So this could be a complete dismissal for James Comey at the end of the day. For Letitia James, they'll have the opportunity to try to refile it, perhaps with a different set of prosecutors, to bring it back to life. But the issue here is procedural. It's not about the merits of the case. What they're arguing and what the judges agree to is that this prosecutor is unlawfully appointed. She can't bring the case.
And Scott, there were some issues bringing the case against Comey forward in the first place. Can you walk us through what took so long?
It did come right up against that statute of limitations I mentioned. It was a 5-year mark since that fall 2020 Senate testimony in question. They brought the case in the fall of 2025 with just hours, if not days, to spare. The backstory here is important. There was a Trump-appointed top prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia. He was ousted near that deadline for not bringing the case forward. A new U.S. attorney was installed, a former Trump White House aide, Lindsay Halligan. She brought the case, one of her first orders of business, but she's the only prosecutor who would stand by this case and put her name on it initially. There was no second person. There was no second prosecutor, so if she's not lawfully appointed, that's just damaging and ultimately led to dismissal in both cases.
And Scott, I know we've been talking about the whole idea of selective or vindictive prosecution. Is that something that would have had some stand-in if this case had actually had, the cases had actually had opportunities to be argued on in court?
That's a great question. One of the consequences of this dismissal, one of them, is that the arguments each has made that these were selective, political, vindictive prosecutions ordered by President Trump. Those arguments are, to a degree, highly irrelevant now. The cases are dismissed. There were arguments just last week in Virginia in the James Comey argument of vindictive prosecution. The judge may still issue an opinion on that. I'm not sure if he will still feel inclined to do so. It's all moot. The case is dismissed. But they, of course, can resuscitate those arguments if the new prosecution is somehow brought against either of these two defendants. But that's a really big if.
And what are the chances when we think about the cases against the case against James Comey, the case against Letitia James? Hers is about mortgage fraud, which would have been about, I believe it was $18,000 is what she was being accused of basically stealing with that mortgage fraud case. What are the chances that this case would have been in front of a judge in the first place, if not for the president pushing for, I guess, the DOJ to go after his political enemies?
Yeah, both of those defendants, James Comey and Letitia James, would say there was no chance this case gets brought forward against anybody else. That's part of an argument. That's a component of a vindictive prosecution argument, that similarly situated people wouldn't face the wrath of the Department of Justice. They both made that argument. There are other people who would have liked to have heard what the judge had to say on that matter, because there are other critics of the president who fear or believe they're soon to be politically prosecuted for alleged wrongdoing. They deny. But at this point, there's no guarantee those opinions will ever be issued, because the cases are now toast. They are gone.
And you know, Scott, that was going to be part of my next question for you. What are the consequences, you think, for those other pending DOJ cases against what you would call opponents of the president?
Yeah, there are other critics of the president who fear they're going to be prosecuted. One of them is known. California Senator Adam Schiff has publicly said he fears he's going to be prosecuted vindictively. He's hired a private attorney to begin representing him in case there's a prosecution, but his is differently situated. Although he also denies any wrongdoing, there's some allegation of fraud with a mortgage he denies. His case is not brought by Lindsay Halligan, this U.S. attorney in Virginia who's unlawfully appointed. There's an investigation underway, CBS News has learned, but it's not in Virginia, and it does not involve a potentially unlawfully appointed prosecutor. So a different situation there.
Yeah. Scott McFarland, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your insight. And CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins me now for much more on this story. Caroline, this ruling does not address the merits of this case. We've been mentioning that. So are future charges possible here?
That's right. As Scott noted, this is purely procedural. A huge win for Comey and James, certainly. Remember, this issue was combined before this judge. So she's ruling on both of these cases about just this narrow issue of whether or not Lindsay Halligan was lawfully acting as the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia when those indictments were signed. And ultimately, this judge, Judge Curry, found that no, Pam Bondi did not actually have the authority to appoint Lindsay Halligan because it was within this 120-day period under the appointments clause that really she has this power, and you can't end run around the appointments clause by appointing different acting and or interim United States attorneys. So that was really the issue. It's a bit of a technicality, really.
Yeah.
And so when you ask the question whether or not these cases can be brought again, you know, this was not a complete win for Comey and James. They wanted this case dismissed with prejudice. The judge decided to dismiss it without prejudice, which means that DOJ could come back, likely with a different prosecutor, likely not with Lindsay Halligan, because remember, now it's the district court that gets to appoint the interim United States attorney in that district, not Trump, not Pam Bondi. And so whether or not they choose to move forward, we will see. The statute of limitations is a much bigger issue in the Comey case because, you know, as we've noted, it was they indicted, I mean, Halligan was appointed on Monday. She indicted on a Thursday, right up against that deadline. There are some arguments that when an indictment is dismissed without prejudice, that regardless of the tolling of, or that essentially the statute tolls for 6 months, they would have 6 months to re-indict. Unclear whether that applies here. We're really in uncharted territory here. But, you know, I'd say very slim chance that the Comey case comes back and less clear with the Tish James case.
I mean, you mentioned, Caroline, uncharted territories here, but I have to ask if the Justice Department does decide that this is a situation they want to bring this case back again. Any chance we'll actually hear of that this year, or is this something we should be watching for next year? Because I know cases can take all these law and all of that, justice system. It takes quite a bit, right?
It does. And, you know, these things take time, which is one of the reasons why, which was one of the arguments James Comey made to dismiss this case on the merits, was that the government didn't take the time that they were supposed to get the warrants to research material that they had seized years earlier. Essentially, they looked through emails and other files without a proper warrant, because that's why these things take time. Yeah. Indictments take time. Getting the issues together takes time. And one of the issues that Lindsay Halligan raised that the judge really criticized her for is that she told those grand jurors that if they didn't feel like there was enough evidence to indict before them today on that grand jury charging day, that they could assume that the government had more in their back pocket. That's why this judge really criticized her, saying this is an indict first and investigate later position. So we'll see.
Did anything else from what the judge had to say, did anything else stand out to you in this case?
Yeah, look, judges like to be conservative. I doubt that we will see an answer to the question about that vindictive and selective prosecution. Judges don't like issuing decisions if they don't have to. It is now really mooted that issue for the Comey case. You know, appeals will abound here. Rest assured, this ruling will be appealed because remember, there are similarly situated acting United States attorneys in this, you know, of this same ilk, essentially, throughout the United States. I think there are 4 now that have this same issue, including Alina Habba in New Jersey. And so, you know, the Justice Department likely would love to get a reversal on this opinion and would love to have something, you know, a higher court essentially saying that they have unlimited ability to reappoint United States attorneys without the consent of the Senate, essentially doing whatever they want and putting in place whomever they want.
And speaking of the vindictive or selective prosecution, a term that I'm sure so many people know about now because we talk about it so much in relation to these 2 cases. If this case is to be, the judge's ruling is to be appealed and both cases are brought back, do you think that's something that both James Comey and Letitia James will still continue to argue, that the cases against them are basically a form of vindictive or selective prosecution?
Oh, absolutely. Those motions are strong. As we often note, those are very difficult motions to make. They're separate motions, both vindictive and selective prosecution. And you don't need to show that you're innocent of the alleged crime. Essentially, you just need to show that the only reason the prosecution was brought was for vindictive reasons, and or that similarly situated people in the same position were not targeted. And so, that Truth Social post that we think was supposed to be a private, text to Pam Bondi that Trump, in which Trump really directed her to indict these people. That's gold evidence for vindictive and selective prosecution. The fact that Eric Sieber, the former acting United States attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, he was pushed out. He was essentially told to resign because he wouldn't bring these cases against these two individuals. And so that's very strong evidence of both selective and vindictive prosecutions. And that evidence will be there regardless of who else could potentially be in this seat of prosecuting this case.
Yeah. Caroline Polisi, thank you so much for your insight today. Appreciate your time. And we're now learning more about a third of those arrested by Border Patrol in Charlotte. A CBS News exclusive when we come back right here on CBS News 24/7.
Everybody all set?
Everybody good?
You guys are set?
Okay, let's go.
What happened to our clapper?
It's about to go down.
What is going on?
What's going on here? It's about to get real.